Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail. Today we are going to share scary urban legends horror stories. First story, a local urban legend. Prologue. The story I'm about to tell you is considered an urban legend where I come from. But like most urban legends, there are probably pieces of truth scattered in it. This story, to my knowledge, has only been passed around by word of mouth, and this will likely be the first time it has ever been written down and shared to people outside of my area. My granddad told the story to me when I was about 13, and I will do my best to tell it to you the way he told it to me. On Halloween in 1985, the town's only recorded triple murder-suicide occurred. The crime happened to a family of four that lived 2 streets over from where I lived. The family seemed perfectly normal, helped their neighbors often, and fit right into the community. So it was a shock whenever the police found the scene the next morning. The cops were able to piece together a rough sequence of events, but they were not able to find a motive other than mental illness. Their full report was never released to the public, but if you caught an off-duty cop at the right time on a Saturday night, you could get some bits and pieces of what happened. Witnesses had seen most of the family out trick-or-treating that night, and it was said that the police found the bodies of the father, mother, and the younger brother still in their costumes. The whole house was dark and quiet except for the light and static coming from a television. After a closer look, the police found a couple of VHS tapes the family had rented from Blockbuster earlier that night. The identity of what the tapes were isn't known for sure, but the most common ones told were George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, John Carpenter's The Thing, and Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. Whether the movies had anything to do with the murder or not is up for debate, but most think it probably triggered what happened. The scene is said to have been incredibly gory with spray and puddles of blood where the bodies were discovered. The father, mother, and younger brother each had their throats sliced open. The wound was so deep that when autopsies were done, the cut mark could be seen on the vertebrae at the back of their necks. Because of the coldness and severity of the acts, the police initially thought an intruder had come in and committed them, until they found the body of the older brother. The older brother was the only member of the family not in costume, and witnesses didn't see him with the family earlier that night. The police seemed to believe he stayed home to watch the horror movies, and once his family returned, he killed them in quick succession. His body was found sitting cross-legged on the floor at the end of the hallway of the upstairs bedrooms. The older brother's throat was not slashed as the others, but what was guessed to be the murder weapon was sticking out of his left ear. At his feet was a note sloppily written in crayon consisting of only 2 sentences. I didn't know. I had to be sure. Epilogue. As I mentioned before, there is no concrete, irrefutable evidence to support this story. However, there is plenty of circumstantial evidence. 1. It is said that if you look at the county archives, you will be able to find that a triple murder-suicide did in fact happen in my hometown, but any other details have been redacted. 2. There is an abandoned house 2 streets west of the house I grew up in and has been that way for as long as I can remember. 3. Our local graveyard has 4 unmarked graves fenced in together and away from the rest of the gravestones. 4. In 1986, the city council voted unanimously to replace Halloween with a more wholesome Harvest Day and has ignored any motions or petitions to change it back since then. Second story. Series. Since when are urban legends true? My story started this summer, just a couple weeks after I turned 16. I started working at the local park. As in, it isn't actually a park, but the owners want us to treat it that way. It's actually the garden of an elderly couple. They have this huge garden, and they transformed this into, you guessed it, a park. And that's how it's currently used as. For a long time, I didn't know that the park wasn't a real park. Not that many people come here, but that's probably because I live in this really small village. And even though not that many people come there, they still needed help cleaning. And because they didn't have enough money to hire professionals, my mother offered that I could clean the park. For money, of course. I don't do that much. I clean the park, give the flowers water, take a nap, and go home. But sometimes I woke up in the house of the elderly couple. I would wake up on a couch because of the smell of freshly baked cookies. This happened if I didn't wake up when they tried to wake me up or found me sleeping in the park late. And if it was too late for me to go home, I would sleep there. They treated me like their grandson, and I didn't mind. The only thing that does bother me is the fact that they treat me like a little kid. But whenever my mother visits, they treat her like a little kid too. I'm pretty sure they treat everyone like a little kid. I wish that it stayed that way. But if it did, I wouldn't have a reason to post this, right? You see, I normally don't stay longer than 10 p.m. there. Either I leave or they bring me inside before that time. To be honest, I should have known something creepy was about to happen. For a while, I heard a voice calling me sweetie, honey buns, or some other ridiculously tooth-rotting sweet nickname before I fall asleep in the park. I'm pretty sure they said more, but now I know who it was. I don't want to think about it. You can argue and say that it was my mother or Mrs. B. Star, but it was undoubtedly a male voice. A deep, bone-chilling voice. The complete opposite of Mr. B's asterisk voice. He sounds like a grandfather telling his grandchildren stories next to a fireplace. But back to the night I like to call. Why the hell didn't I call an exorcist? As usual, I took a nap on the wooden bench. Sounds uncomfortable, but there are a lot of pillows on it. When I woke up, I saw that it was almost midnight. And that's when I remembered that they told me that they would be visiting some friends of them in another town, and that they would stay there for a while. My mother would sleep at a coworker's house because she had to work late and didn't want to drive home in the middle of the night. Lucky for me, Mrs. B gave me a key to her house, so I didn't have to walk home late if I overslept. This is the point in most horror movies that a serial killer comes and kills the person who recently had sex. Or that point where the ghost of a little girl comes to them and kills them. Or a doll. Either way, if you're a stupid teen like I am, and you're outside at midnight according to horror movies, you'll die. Sometimes I wish that it was a serial killer. In an indirect way, it kind of was. Because if I died, I don't have to deal with idiots. Oh? You want to know what had happened? Long story short, sometimes urban legends about some weird guy killing 3 little kids your friends tell you to creep you out aren't just urban legends. Short story shorter, I found the spirits or ghosts of 3 little children who got murdered in the park. Hold up before you go. Why tell the scary part of the story so anticlimactic? Or I expected a creepy story. And to those people, I want to say, normal murdered kids aren't creepy, and they don't kill every adult they see because they got killed by one. They're scared, and they don't want to be stuck in a creepy place. Now the park isn't creepy, but they're kids and they're lonely. No one comes in the park after midnight, and the 3 little kids were happy to see someone. A week passed, and something was added to my routine. At night, I would go back to the park and visit the 3 kids. We would draw or play hide and seek. But at the end of the week, something happened. The kids and I were drawing something when I suddenly felt the presence of someone else. It was calming and felt nice. I looked up from my paper and saw a light. Obviously not the light, but you get what I mean. When the light faded, the kids and I were surprised to see a blonde girl with wings and a halo smiling at us. She thanked me for taking care of the kids, and a piece of paper appeared in front of me. She asked me to sign the contract so the little kids finally could go to heaven. To this day, I still don't know why the red light bulb in my head didn't turn on. Aren't contracts things that demons do? Why did I have to sign a contract for them to go to heaven? Nothing tied the kids to earth. So why didn't they go to heaven the moment they died? Lucky, or better said, not so lucky. For me, I have the answers to those questions now. As you can guess, I signed the contract. The kids cheered and we said goodbye to each other. One of them gave a drawing she made. 3 small stick figures resembling the kids and one bigger one resembling me. It was adorable. A port opened and the little kids ran through it. I waved at them and the port closed. Next to me stood the angel and I thanked her. She laughed a laugh I will never forget. Her blonde hair turned black and her wings melted away. "How you doing, sweetie?" I stood still for a couple of seconds, not wanting to accept the fact that the voice I heard wasn't just my imagination. The angel smiled at me, and I turned around. A guy at least a head taller than me stood in front of me. He had a creepy grin, and for some reason he felt familiar to me. I turned to the angel. "Didn't your mommy tell you that ignoring people is rude?" I turned back to the guy and remembered the story about the 3 killed children. Finally, a light flickered on in my head. "You killed them, didn't you?" The grin turned into a proud smile, and I sighed. "Let me see the contract." It was as if a switch was flipped, turning on every light bulb in my head. The angel smirked, and I looked at her. "Kid, let me tell you something. Everything has its price, and the price to bring those kids to heaven." I stopped listening there. At least the kids went to heaven. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time and probably should go home soon. So I'll tell you what happened really quick. The demon, yes, the angel was a demon. Surprised? But yeah, the demon told me the price for sending the kids to heaven. Apparently, the kids were tied to earth. They were mad and wanted revenge on the man who killed them. Unfortunately, fortune for them, the man got the death penalty, meaning that they couldn't find rest and stayed on earth as spirits. Like I said, I have not much time left. Long story, very short. The contract is in Latin, and big surprise, I don't speak, let alone read Latin. The demon explained me that heaven and hell are tied together. And because the kids don't want to be in the same place as their murderer, he had to go somewhere else. And guess what that somewhere else is? Earth. In the contract stands that I agreed on being the spiritual or whatever guardian of Scott, or the murderer if you don't get it, meaning that he gets to stay on Earth, and if he kills someone it goes on my name. So everyone will think I did it. Sucks, right? So for the past months I had to deal with a serial killer. Don't worry, he can't hurt me, but he's annoying and Alice doesn't really help. Oh yeah, Alice is the name of the demon. Or at least that's what she calls herself. Why I wrote this? I wanted to share some things with you guys, so I get at least a little bit of support. I mean, I can't go to my mother with this. She'll think I went insane. Think of it like an online journal. I'll post shit that happens in my life, and you guys hopefully give me some tips to make my life less shitty. But every good story ends with a lesson. And I guess the lesson of this story is read the damn contract. Can't read the language? The internet exists. Also, angels don't do contracts, demons do. Thanks for reading, and I really hope that at least one of you can help me to fix this problem. I should probably go home now, although I wouldn't mind spending the rest of my life here if it means that I don't have to see them again. But then again, I'll probably miss TV too much. Third story. The Mimic, an urban legend. It was a slow autumn. The trees were shedding their leaves, and the branches moved rhythmically with the soft wind that was blowing against them. I don't have much time left before it finds me, so I'll try to make this as quick as possible. And if you are reading this, try to finish it so you can be prepared and maybe think of a solution to this problem. My neighbor, Mary, held a garage sale yesterday. She pretty much put up all her belongings on sale because she was moving away to live with her sister. It was just a regular sale, nothing out of the extraordinary, but the entire day was almost depressing. I'd known her for almost half a decade, and it was sad seeing her leave, but it was pretty obvious for it to happen considering all the things she went through the previous year. She lost her son and husband last October. It was pretty big back then, and the entire locality knew it. Nothing really happens here, but last October, we were the highlight of all news channels. A couple of burglars got into her house and killed her son and husband. The police got involved, but all their investigation left them to nothing but a dead end. It was never picked up again and was left a cold case. Mary just wanted to forget about all of it and just get away from all this misery. I respected her choice, and I thought it was probably the best thing she could do. Her lawn was completely mobbed by people, half of whom I think are homeless. A lot of the stuff were cheap, and heck, I'm surprised that she wasn't giving any of these for free. I mean, she only charged a couple of bucks on all of them. I looked through the lawn and tried to search for something valuable, but most of the stuff were already hogged by the crowd. I went over to one of the small tables, where I spotted an old Sony Handycam. I picked it up and examined it, and to my surprise, it worked. "Looks like you found something, haven't you?" I turned around to see Mary behind me. She had a smile on her face, but in the inside, I knew how miserable she was. "Well, it is a good deal, so I can't complain." "Hey, you don't have to pay for that. We're dashed." "It doesn't matter. I'm not taking it for free. I want to help you out a bit." She let out a weak smile and walked back towards the crowd. It broke my heart to see her like that. If those burglars chose another house, I bet Mary would probably be busy trying to get her son ready for school. She would have been living the life she would always tell me about. The life with a great husband, a wonderful child, and a sublime house. But not all dreams come true, I guess. I looked at the other tables, which had some bigger stuff on it. I noticed a pretty big suitcase lying on a table. I walked towards it and tried to inspect how reliable it would be to me. The suitcase was quite heavy and weighed at least 50 kilograms. I took the things to the counter, which was just a table with some money scattered on it. I waited for Mary, who was running from table to table, as customers called her. When she finally came to the counter, I gave her the suitcase and the camera. "So, how much is it?" "It'd be $10, but look, you don't have to dash." I handed her the money before she could say anything else. I grabbed the stuff and began heading home, but I turned around to ask her about the suitcase. "Hey, the suitcase is actually pretty heavy. Is there anything you need in it?" "No, it's just probably some old documents." "I don't need them anyways." "Are you sure? I mean, it's like really heavy. I think there's something dashed." "No, just take it." Her voice sounded stern. It wasn't like Mary. It seemed like she lost her tolerance and wanted to get rid of everything she had. "I'm sorry. I just don't want it. You can have it." "All right then, I guess this is goodbye, ain't it?" I let out a smile and waved goodbye. I headed home and watched her slowly pack up the garage sale from a distance. Almost everything was sold out, and she must have reaped at least $200. I went home and sat down. I tried to watch TV and switch through the channels, but nothing could get my mind off the fact that Mary was living. We were best friends in college, and we lived close by since we were 18, and now she's just moving to another state. I was happy for her because she could finally get rid of all the depression she's had to put up with, but I want her to be safe. She's naive, and I didn't want her to face any more misery. I turned the TV off and heard the rain pouring outside. My house is often quiet. I find it pleasant, but sometimes it's just eerie and it feels like someone is watching me. I glanced at the camera that was seated next to me on the sofa. I decided to have a look at it and open it to examine the video's quality. It seemed old due to the dust covering it, and the lens was covered in a spider web. The video quality was grainy as an old film. It was hard to make out whether the lens were closed or opened. I pressed almost every button on the camera to improve its quality, but nothing seemed to be a solution. What was I even thinking? A Sony camera being sold for like $7 would work? Nevertheless, I accepted the crappy quality of the camera and decided to use it to take photos when I went on trips, but before I could do that, I had to make sure if there was anything on the camera. I began to click on some buttons on the screen and eventually ended up on the gallery tab. The photos and videos displayed on the screen dated back to 2007, and the last video was in October 2021, the same month Matthew, Mary's son, died. I didn't want to look at the videos, but I had to. Matthew's death was a surprise to the entire neighborhood. He was a nice kid and would help the old people out. I used to drop him at school before I got a job. I just wanted to look at all the joy that happened before everything went downhill. I opened the first video, filmed in May 2007. It was a video of Matthew's birthday. It was so heat-warming to see Mary and her son that happy, but I don't think I can ever see her that joyful anymore after what happened. I went through all the other videos. It was hard to go through all of them, and at multiple times I just had to pause and get a tissue to wipe my eyes. After an hour, I finally reached the videos that were shot in October 2021. I clicked on the first video, and a loading symbol appeared on the screen. It felt like hours until the video finally began playing. Video 1, October 28th, 2021. The video started out different. Everything was completely black, and I couldn't make out a single object. I thought Mary forgot to open the lens, but I could make out the silhouette of something standing in front of the camera. It almost had a human-like body, but I couldn't be sure due to the darkness. A voice began talking to the camera. It was Matthew. The video began picking up some brightness. Okay, yeah, I think it's a bit clear. He let out a sigh. Gosh, October's almost done already. I guess time passes by fast when you don't have tests. He let out a subtle chuckle. Why am I even doing this? Gosh, this is a really dumb idea. If anyone is watching this, you should probably stop. It's just going to be videos of me talking to the camera. My mom shouldn't have even given me this. He takes the camera into his hands and almost ends the video, but puts it back on the bed with his face only partially visible. I don't really have anything to say. Today my friends and I found this diary. Daniel found it and he showed us. It was pretty weird. Like, first of all, the handwriting was just scribbles with short descriptions, and I thought I was bad at drawing. I looked at the time. It was pretty late, but I wanted to finish all the videos. It was about this thing, an entity. It's an urban legend. I don't really know, but it talks about this thing called the Mimic. Yeah, I know it sounds stupid, and it is, but I'm not lying. I don't really know much about it apart from its existence, but I probably shouldn't read more of it. I was surprised Matthew never mentioned this to me, but he's a teenager. He probably doesn't tell everything to everyone. The stuff's messed up. I really shouldn't have read it. I don't think it's true, but it's still bad enough. There was a sketch of a woman and her baby was ripped out of her stomach and it was being eaten by that thing. There were red marks all over the sketch, and it was all messed up. Gosh, I look and sound like an idiot. All right, I think this is enough for today. He took the camera into his hands and ended the video. That was the end of the first video. There are 3 more videos left, but I can't type them right now. I gotta get out of here before it gets me. I don't think I have much time left. It might even be coming for me right now. I keep seeing it in the corner of my eye, or my mind might be playing tricks on me. I don't know. I'll try to tell you guys about the rest of the videos within a few days. Fourth story. There's this old urban legend about this ice cream truck in our neighborhood. Before I was born, my mother and father grew up in this same suburban neighborhood. The year for them when this started was 1993, and they were about 12 to 13 years old. And during that time, they would always spend their summers outside since it would be too hot to be parked inside reading comics or playing with toys. My parents would play on the block with a whole bunch of kids, but the ones that stuck out were Nicole, Manny, and Lee. These were the close friends of both my parents, and they did pretty much everything together. The summer of '93 was extremely hot, according to my mom, so she and the rest of the group were playing with super soakers and water balloons to cool off. My dad remembered that Lee stopped what he was doing and turned his head to see a bright white ice cream truck playing the Mr. Softy song, slowly creeping up on the street. In that moment, a bunch of kids came out with their $5 bills in hand as they ran up to the radiant truck. With their wide smiles and high-pitched demands for single cones, popsicles, and snow cones, they all rushed the truck in happiness. My parents, Nicole, and Manny went inside to ask their parents for money, while he made his way to grab some water. As he was walking, though, he noticed the truck getting ready to leave as quick as when it arrived. But what was strange about the whole thing was that the kids that were by the truck were nowhere to be seen when he looked over to the window spot. It was like they all just vanished. The only thing Lee saw was the ice cream man, giving off a friendly smile in his direction. And in the next minute, he shut his window door with a slam before slowly driving away. He stood there on that empty street alone and petrified. When my parents, Nicole, and Manny finally came back outside, they saw him standing alone, so they called out to him, but he still just stood there like he was in a trance. He only pointed his finger towards the direction of where the ice cream truck headed and didn't say a word. A few hours later, the police were called for the children that mysteriously disappeared at that truck, and all he kept telling them was it was the smiling ice cream man. The next few weeks after that incident, no kids were found at all, and life continued on normally for my parents and their friends. There were different ice cream trucks coming and going, but Lee wouldn't ever go to them because of the fear of what he saw. It was the middle of August and summer was winding down. My parents and their friends were staying out more late than usual outside riding bikes in their neighborhood when they heard the Mr. Softy jingle again. This time, everyone had their own money due to chores or other jobs around the neighborhood. My dad told me the sun was setting, but it was so humid that day that they literally rushed over to the truck on their bikes to get anything that was cold to help themselves cool down. The only one who was hesitant was Lee, because he knew that the ice cream truck was sketchy. He still went over to keep an eye on his friends, but when he got over there, he made sure to keep his distance. When everyone put their bikes on the curb and lined up by the truck window, everything looked fine to Lee at first. Everyone was getting their ice cream, but he noticed that the man was the same man he saw that day. He dropped my mom's ice cream and apologized as he closed the window to go fetch another one. At that moment, Lee knew it was time to go, and he didn't waste any time trying to warn everyone either. "Robbie, let's just go to my house. I got a bunch of ice cream and shit. We really don't need this truck." Lee nudged my dad and whispered to him, while giving him an obvious "shit's about to go down" look in his eye according to my dad. My dad, however, was telling Lee that he was just paranoid and waved him off. Lee at that moment tried again, but this time pulled my dad and told him again more seriously. My dad apparently was about to push him off when Lee told my dad about what happened the day the kids disappeared. "You remember when I was talking about the smiling ice cream man? This is him," Lee told my dad in a hushed tone, so he wouldn't arouse suspicion. My dad then walked over to my mom and tried to get her to back away from the truck. But they weren't fast enough. The ice cream man came back to the window and called out to my mom, "Aren't you forgetting your ice cream?" My mom brushed off my dad's arm and walked over to get her cone, but she didn't notice the sprayer in the man's other hand. In one swift motion, he put the sprayer up to my mom's face, and before Manny, Nicole, or Lee could pull her or my dad back, they all got hit by the gas, and after a few coughing fits, all of them fell to the ground and blacked out. My parents apparently remember waking up in a poorly lit room that was only illuminated by a weak and flickering bulb. My dad was the first to wake up, seeing Manny and Nicole chained to the walls and Lee tied up in a chair next to my mom. My dad quickly looked around the room quickly and saw some of the kids from a few weeks ago, but not in the way he wanted to. Some of them had their throats slit, deep stab wounds in their faces, disemboweled, and some even having fingers cut off. It was, to be put lightly, as my dad called it, a horror show. He started to panic and scream, but realized that his mouth was gagged and saw that the others were too. He could hear steps coming down the stairs, creaking more and more the closer they got. He saw the ice cream man, but this time it's as if the man became something more sinister, something darker. The man's smile was twisted into a wide, malicious grin, and his eyes gave off no glint or any form of light. The clean white uniform shirt and his khaki slacks were replaced with a smock with dried-up blood stains marking it like a tie-dye shirt. In his hands, he was holding a large hunting knife that looked dangerously sharp and well-polished, that had started to reflect brightly off the dim light. He walked over to my mother and lifted up her chin with his hand. "I'm going to have some fun with you before I snuff that pretty little light out of you," he said with a greasy smile. My dad tried to struggle out of his restraints to help my mom, but the ropes were too strong for him to get out of. The man then walked over to Lee and looked at him with intensity in his eyes. This could have been so easier if you didn't open your mouth." Following his slightly hushed voice was swift right hook aimed right for Lee's cheek. My dad heard his cheek give off a loud crack and his muffled grunts behind the gag. He could see Lee starting to have tears in his eyes, but gave the evil adult a defiant look and stared him down. "Aha, you think you got guts, kid? We'll fucking see." The man started to laugh maliciously as he walked over to Manny and ran the knife lightly across his throat as he brought it to the cloth gag and gave it an easy slice. "So, kid, your friend over there thinks he's tough. You want to prove him wrong?" He put the knife up to Manny's cheek and gave it a light cut. "Fuck you. Help us, we're stuck in here. Help." Manny tried to call out to anyone at all, but all the vile man did was laugh hysterically. "You can scream all you want. No one will hear you. No one at all," the man said with a wide grin as he held the knife close to Manny's face. "Fuck you, you fucking weird shithead." And with that, Manny headbutted the man in the nose. The man stammered back and held his bleeding nose in his hand. My dad noticed that his eyes were more malicious and full of contempt after that hit, and then an awkward silence filled the room. The man looked at Manny with a deadpan, soulless stare and flashed that friendly smile he showed us hours ago. Then in that moment, he ran up to Manny and stabbed him in the stomach. My dad tried to get out of his restraints to help, but the ropes were knotted too tight. My parents had to watch in horror as their friend was brutally gutted and stabbed over and over in his chest, his face, and even in his head, to the point where brain and viscera was everywhere on the man. He rubbed Manny's blood on his face and let out a deep exhale. He walked over to a cabinet in the room and pulled out a scalpel and slowly walked over to Nicole. The thumps were the only thing echoing in the room as Lee and my parents looked in despair as he walked up to her and held the scalpel right over her left eye. He then brushed the hair out of her face and hovered the scalpel dangerously close to her pupil. "Your eyes," the man said as he started to breathe frantically. Nicole tried to struggle, but the man held her head firmly on the wall, staring deeply into her eyes as he waved the blade over them. They just looked so pure and full of hope. He looked over to Lee and then said, "You still got guts, kid?" With that remark, the man raised his arm back, getting ready to use it. Nicole tried to shake her head to move out of the way, but it was hopeless as the scalpel pierced her eye and the man smiled widely in glee. He took off the gag so that he could hear her cry in agony. The remaining group watched with tears running down their cheeks. They watched him wiggle around the scalpel deeper and deeper into her eye as Nicole's cries became primal and unnerving. My dad recalled trying to fray the ropes even more to help, but it seemed like he didn't need to as he heard footsteps rushing down the stairs quickly. Due to the street cams on the stoplights, the police were called, and they came to the house where the truck was parked at and went down to the basement. They all had their weapons drawn as they saw the man picking out Nicole's eye and looking at the officers with an evil and sadistic smile. The officers screamed at him to put his hands up, but he just walked slowly towards them. That's when my dad heard gunshots and saw the bullets hitting the man in the body. He still kept moving with each shot and started to raise his hunting knife to strike while gurgling in excitement due to his wounds. The officers finally put him down with a shot to the head, and he fell back onto the ground, never to move again. Years passed, and my parents, alongside with Lee and Nicole, never really got over the situation, and they still felt like Malcolm and I weren't safe in the neighborhood. I wish I could say they were wrong. I really wish I could. The legend, however, still reigns true to this day, and here's how it goes. Every summer onward after the incident, you could hear the Mr. Softy jingle in the neighborhood in the middle of the night. It gets louder and louder the more you try to ignore it. If you look out the window to see what's causing the sound, you will see an ice cream truck in the shadows with a figure looking out of it. If you look into his red eyes, you will walk towards his truck and be taken away and vanish. Malcolm, and I didn't believe in it because it sounded crazy at first, but then it made sense. A lot of kids who went missing after the incident apparently sneaked out, and no traces of a struggle was noted. This means that most of the kids had to be targeted by that song, due to one kid being lucky enough to get restrained by his dad. As soon as he snapped out of his trance, he looked around scared, asking if the song stopped. However, I was sadly still skeptical because some of the kids that were targeted had histories of mental illnesses and issues like psychosis, so it got hard to believe in after a while. We talked about it one night over the phone, and he was understandably scared. What if we start hearing that shit? My mom lost her eye, bro. His voice got a little shaky. I don't want to end up like that, man. I reassured him that everything would be fine and that the man that did all that has been long dead. I told him that nothing would happen to him since we literally live right across the street from each other, and to call me if something happens. With that, we both called it a night and went to sleep. I had a dream where I was walking down some steps leading down to a dim light. As I walked towards it, I could smell something decaying, and as I reached the end of the steps, the light brightened up the entire room. Bodies of kids were everywhere, dismembered and eviscerated. I tried my hardest not to throw up, and as I looked around, I noticed him. The man was in back of the basement at a table, sharpening his knife. He stopped suddenly and slowly turned to meet my eyes. He flashed that wide and malicious grin that I only heard about in recalls from my parents. With a laugh, he charged towards me ready to strike, and as I put out my hands to guard myself, I woke up. I caught my breath, telling myself in my head that I was okay and I was alive. Stupid fucking story. I told myself as I pulled up the covers and turned on phone to ease my mind with YouTube. As I put in my passcode, I heard a song that sounded all too familiar. It was the jingle of an ice cream truck, and it was getting louder and louder by the minute. Turns out the legend was true after all. Fifth story. All the urban legends about me are wrong. Throughout all of human history, there has been one constant throughout the variables of civilization's advancement: stories. As mankind moved away from small clay huts to monolithic steel skyscrapers, the yearning to tell and listen to stories has always persisted. It's a way of not only growing and evolving the mind, it's a way of connecting with one another. Yet out of all the methods of storytelling that have evolved from the small carvings of stick figures along Neolithic walls, there's one in particular that seems to strike a nerve more than any other: legends of horror. From the very moment you learn to tuck your children into bed or gather around in communion by a fire, Stories of dark and terrifying creatures have invaded your nightmares through the catalyst of scary stories. Many of these classics have become so immovable in human culture that they've transformed from mere tales of horror to urban legends. Out of the plethora of dark tales told in the night, there's one that holds a certain interest close to my heart. The tales of a mysterious interloper that plays a mesmerizing tune from his pipe to lure unsuspecting children to their doom in the forest brings a certain interest to me. Not because of how it can scare the shit out of a misfit to try and get them to behave. It's because it's about me. Yes, I know what you must be thinking. What the fuck is this guy talking about? Well, just let me explain. First of all, for those of you who are unaware of the tale of the Pied Piper, let me give you a small rundown. Originating from Germany, the legend tells of a town overrun with rats. The rodents feast on the town's produce and spread death and disease. Eventually, the town tries to hire a mysterious rat wrangler out of desperation. The wrangler plays his magic pipe, causing all the rats of the town to drown themselves in the sewers and wells of the town. Upon receiving no payment for his services, the piper begins to play a tune late at night, causing all the children of the town to get out of bed and head for the river. It is then that one by one, each child walks in a said river, drowning themselves. Pretty fucked up, right? That's because it's wrong. The legends have been misconstrued through a game of urban telephone lasting generations. Well, that's why I'm here, to set the record straight. So here we go. The Legend of the Pied Piper, written by yours truly. Once upon a time, in the mystical land of Germany, there lived a being of the earth. This being was strong and intelligent and had just as many hopes and aspirations as man. Yet he was not of man. He knew many things about himself, except from that of where he came from. The being spent many long years in the forests, educating himself about the world around him as well as its inhabitants. During the day, he would spend time with his friends, who were the fellow inhabitants of the forest floor. At night, he would take his musical pipe fashioned from the pine of the trees around him and play. Music was like a drug for the piper. He knew many songs, of which he would play a new tune every night. Once every so often, the piper would play one song through his instrument he knew all too well, the Song of Hunger. Unlike the rest, this song would reach far and wide in the land around him. Yet only one other would ever hear it. This other would be a child. Just one. No more, no less. As the music would play, the child would go off wandering away from home, into the forest. Almost every encounter between the children and the piper would be the same. The entranced child would walk into the woods smiling a cleaning smile as they came to the source of the wonderful tune. They would look up and see the piper perched along one of the tree branches up above. "Are you the one who plays such lovely music?" the child would ask. It would be then that the music would stop. Almost immediately after silence returned to the forest, the child would look around in complete adolescent confusion. Having absolutely no idea where they were or how they got there, they would look up at the piper and ask how to get home. Home? The piper would ask, hopping down from his tree branch. "My sweet, delectable child, you are not going home?" For a short time afterward, the piper approached the child. The quiet forest would be filled with the screams of pain and anguish as the child would be feasted upon by the piper. Tendon by tendon, limb by limb, bone by bone, the piper would consume and leave nothing to waste. But out of everything consumed, the fear and pain of the child would fill the pipe's belly more than anything. It would strengthen his essence with every scream and cry for mercy, to which there would be none. Once the meal was finished, the piper would dig far below for a short while and sleep. Every so often he would awaken for a season and play music, engage with his friends of the forest, and consume a meal. Then he would return back to the ground for another short while to sleep once again. On one particular awakening, however, he was not greeted to surrounding trees as he crept forth from the ground, but by houses and streets of stone. The wonderful forest he had known all his life had become the town of Hamelin. The piper was disgusted by what man had done to his home. However, peering through his anger was curiosity. He would roam the streets of Hamelin, seeing its many inhabitants while also searching for any remnants of his old home. Eventually, he came to the river of Hamelin and was filled with delight. The same water that had run through the forest floor still flowed through the grounds surrounding the town. But all of this adventuring had done the piper in. His belly was gumbling. He was hungry. But the piper knew he could not walk into the town of Hamelin and take a child just because of his appetite. That was rude. And while man may have been rude, he was not. But he was angry. Angry at the perversion that man had done to his home. So as he sat on the outer banks behind the town of Hamelin in the dark of the night, he smiled as a plan arose in his mind. That next morning, dawn arose over a Hamelin under siege by hordes of rats. The rodents themselves had arrived by another one of the piper's talented songs. Day by day, for weeks, the people of Hamelin would try to stomp and smash all the rats, but to no avail. All hope for the little town had seemed lost, until one day the piper came strolling through the streets to the mayor's home. The mayor was weary and tired from the troubling invasion of rats, but was overjoyed when the piper offered a solution. For sufficient payment, I shall find your streets of the rodent infestation, the piper said with a smile. Oh, but of course, anything for someone who could save our troubled town, exclaimed the mayor. That day the piper walked out onto the streets of Hamelin and played another tune on his pipe. The music carried over all of the rats of the town as they safely evacuated the town just as they had appeared. The townspeople rejoiced and clapped as their filthy streets were clean of rodents once again. Upon the completion of his work, the piper returned to the mayor for adequate compensation for his work. How much coin for your service? Asked the mayor of Hamelin. None, replied the piper. For a moment the mayor was confused, until the piper continued. I only asked for your child, the piper said with a smile on his face and a deeper grumbling in his belly. With a face of rage and disgust, the mayor threw the piper out of his home, as the people of Hamelin beat and bruised him till he left their town. It was here that the piper had been changed forever. For the first time in his entire life, he looked back at the distant town of Hamelin with revenge in his eyes. That night, the piper's song of hunger filled the air of Hamelin and lifted each dreaming child of the town out of their bed. In the midst of twilight, the children murdered their parents in their sleep, the perfect betrayal as repentance for their betrayal of the piper. Covered in blood, the children walked down the streets of Hamelin, carried by the soothing song of the piper. As they came to the river outside of the town, one by one the children walked into the river. By dawn, every single child of the town floated in the bloody river of Hamelin, except for one. The son of the mayor, the piper's payment. There, and then the piper feasted once again, next to the river filled with the true pests of Hamelin. The child's screams carried far in the crisp morning air, yet there was no one left to hear it. With his belly full and the town emptied, the piper dug himself a place in the ground to sleep once again for a short while. And unlike the wretched people of Hamelin, the piper lived happily ever after. There we go. That's a nice story, isn't it? Even nicer that the whole thing is fixed. Of course, I hate that it took so many centuries for the director's cut of this story to even come to light, but I've been asleep for so long. And I have to say, I am quite impressed with the way the world has progressed in terms of technology and architecture. But I'm quite disgusted by the further perversion of this once green world. But at the end of the day, what can one lonesome piper do in a world so vast and alien to him now? Well, I suppose we'll both find out together now, won't we? Well, I better go on and get off of here. I'm getting hungry, and my pipe has been quiet for long enough. Sixth story. My small town and its many urban legends. The car that no one comes out of. Anyone who has even spent time in a small town knows how rumors fly. Everywhere you go, you will hear gossip about affairs, who was kicked out of town, how the manager of the local diner got fired, and so on. Sure, my town might have those things, but the rumors don't stop there. Anomalies, missing people, cryptids, you name it. Around almost every corner you'll find something you wish you hadn't. For a bit more context, I live in a small town of about 2,000 people in eastern Colorado. For privacy reasons, that is all the information I will give you about my location. I was born and raised here. After graduating high school, I just never left and had no intention of leaving. For the most part, these rumors are just that. Rumors. Urban legends, folklore, whatever word you find fitting. At least that's what I believed until just a few years ago, when I started to get curious about some of the rumors. When I was young, I would just stumble upon them. As I got older, I would seek them out. To uncover the oddities of this town I am so fond of. I am here to tell you all about my small town and all its wonderful and terrifying anomalies one at a time. Starting with Old Man Marley's abandoned car. It was the summer of 2017. My friends and I were bored and wandering around private property. Hey, wait! Isn't this Old Man Marley's land? Linda said to me with a burst of energy. Yeah, I think it is. Why does it matter? I respond back to her in an uninterested tone. Callie, you don't remember the old rumor about him? You're kidding, right? Linda remarked with a snicker. You honestly expected me to remember every little rumor this damn town has? Just as I finished my sentence, Ally jumped in. Oh, come on, you have to remember. Kids have been talking about Old Man Marley since middle school. I shook my head as she tried to jog my memory. You know, the old car in the field that people never came out of or whatever. Yeah, I think I remember something like that. I responded back half-heartedly. Come on, let's go try and find it, Ally said with excitement. I promise you it's not as fun as you think it is, Linda said with a chuckle. Wait, you've been in it? I said with my interest rising. No, I've actually never seen anyone sit in it. I just looked at it from afar and felt creeped out and left. We all stood still in our places. Our curiosity slowly grew inside of us. I think I can remember where it was. It's been a few years, but let's look. We walked around the 100-acre property casualty for the next hour when we finally found it. It was nearly impossible to make out the make or model of the car. It looked like it was once a light blue, but was covered in years of rust and decay, weathered by the hot summer sun and harsh winters. I'm not really a car expert, but it looked like a car from the 1950s. It was slightly sunken into the earth, like it had begun to accept its fate as part of the land. It was about a mile away from a road, so it really didn't make a lot of sense for it to be out there. However, it wouldn't be the first time I saw a random old car just decaying in some dirt. As we got closer to the car, we felt uneasy. The car had a few trees and bushes surrounding it that would just slightly scratch at the paint, making a hideous screech as the wind blew. We were a couple feet away and started to shyly giggle. All of us were unsure as to why we were so nervous. Linda learned to open the door. It took some muscle, but she got it open. The windows were either tinted or became black some other way, because we couldn't see inside. Our jaws hit the floor when we looked inside. We were blown away by a beautiful 1950s interior. What was surprising is that it looked brand new. At least I would imagine it would look brand new. The seats were cherry red and leather. I could smell the new car smell from feet away. Fuzzy dice hanging from the rearview mirror. And strangest of all, the radio was softly playing an old song that none of us recognized. I had goosebumps all over my body. We all heard some rumors about the car, but none of us remembered ever hearing about the inside being perfectly preserved. Linda leaned forward and found keys in the ignition. She took a deep breath and sat down. Ally and I both gasped as she hit the car seat. We all froze, feeling like idiots trying not to move as the wind whistled by us. "See, guys, I told you it was silly," Linda said as she started to fidget with stuff inside the car. Ally and I made our way around the car looking at it at every angle. Something still felt so wrong about all of it. "Sorry to disappoint you ladies, but I am still here. As you can see, I am still in the car even though Dash." She shut the car door before she finished her sentence. Ally and I stood by the car waiting for an uncomfortable amount of time for her to open the door back up. We figured she was trying to be funny or trying to scare us, and we didn't want to get in the way of her joke. After what must have been 90 seconds, I walked up to the door. I flung the car door open, expecting her to yell "gotcha" at me or something dumb, but to my shock, she wasn't in the car. Not only that, but the interior of the car now looked old like the outside of the car. The radio was off, and the keys were gone. The two of us spent the next hour freaking out trying to find her. We tried to find her on our own because we didn't want to get in trouble for being on private property, but after finding no signs of her, we asked for help. That was the last time I ever saw Linda. The years passed by, and it was as if nobody cared she went missing. I couldn't even find records of her disappearance online. A couple years later, I was wandering around Old Man Marley's field. I saw the car and was brave enough to open the car door, and I was amazed to see the beautiful new interior that was in the car before Linda went missing. The old-timey song that echoed on the radio sent shivers down my spine. It brought me back to the last time I saw Linda. I pulled myself out of my fuzzy memories and walked back into town. I was planning on just going home, but stopped by the local diner. I got inside just as it started to rain. It felt like the weather was trying to match how I was feeling. I sat down at the high-top bar with the bar stool squeaking in the process. Mrs. Patty saw me from the kitchen and got a puzzled look on her face. I won't go into too much detail about Mrs. Patty, but she has been in this town longer than most people I know. She has definitely seen some things, but that's another story for another time. "Why so gloomy, baby?" she said with a smile and a twang. "It's nothing. I just have a lot going through my head." I could tell as soon as I looked up at her that she didn't believe my lie. She was a stubborn woman, and I knew I wasn't going to win this game. Okay, you win. Have you ever heard anything about that old car in Mr. Marley's field?" Before I could even get the sentence out, her eyes widened. It was clear I jogged her memory. "Oh, wow, it's been years since I thought about that car. Yes, when I was young, we used to dare each other to go sit in it. It started out with people just saying it was haunted because of the music that would play on the radio. Then one day, my friend Rebecca shut the door. Me and a few other kids watched from a little ways away, but got confused when the door didn't open. I walked up to open it up, and she was gone. We searched for her for a while, then gave up and went home. We told our parents, and that was that. A week later, my friends and I all went back. My friend Sal did the same as Rebecca. He sat down and shut the door. I think you can guess where the story goes from there. I never saw Rebecca or Sal again. They just disappeared into thin air. Yet another one of the big missed stories of this town, she murmured as she whipped down the bar counter. "Wait, your friends are the ones that started the urban legend?" "Yes, unfortunately. They didn't get justice. It seemed like everyone else just forgot about them. She paused and then looked at me. I could tell she had the realization that I had been to the old car. "Oh no, don't tell me you dash," I interrupted her. "Yes, you remember my friend Linda? She got in the car and never came out." "Oh, that poor sweet girl. I'm so sorry, Callie," she said to me in a loving tone while I tried not to lose it. You know, something that always stood out to me about that car was the keys in the ignition. As she finished her sentence, I perked up. "Well, what about the keys?" I replied, "Well, I'm sure as you know when you open up the car, the inside looks as good as new. It looks as if it's been sent back from the 1950s, but as soon as someone gets in and shuts the door, the next time the door is open, the interior is old and matching what the rest of the car looks like. But do you know what's missing when you open that door back up? The keys." "Exactly. I don't know if that means anything, but where do those keys go?" "I don't know. It's probably nothing, but I'm too old now to do anything about it." "No, I think you're onto something," I blurted out, and I jumped off my chair and ran back into the rain. I ran back to the old car. As I sprinted through the trees and jumped into puddles, I started to think how stupid the idea was. I finally had my eyes on the car. As soon as my eyes landed on it, I swore I felt it looking back at me, daring me to get in. I slowly approached the car, feeling dumb for being so scared, but had to remind myself to stay sharp. I wrapped my cold fingers around the car handle. The sounds of the raindrops hitting the windshield gave me a false sense of peace. I opened the door, and I was greeted with the all too familiar sights and sounds of the car's interior. The saxophone on the radio sounded louder than ever. I put my knee on the seat, making sure that if the wind blew the door shut, my leg would stop it. I leaned over to take the key out and was met with more resistance than expected. I assumed it was just from the keys rusting and getting stuck. As I pulled harder and harder, I started to feel dizzy and lightheaded. I let off the keys and sat for a moment to think, making sure my leg was still protecting the door from shutting. As I sat in the car, I realized how relaxed I felt, how soothing the music started to sound, how soft the leather seats felt against my leg resting on it. I felt an intense urge to sit in the car and shut the door. After a couple minutes, it went from an urge to something I actively had to fight off. I shut my eyes and gritted my teeth, grabbing the keys and pulling one last time. To my surprise, I was able to get them out. The music started to blare and went from a claiming tone to a raging orchestra. It took all my strength to leave the car, but I knew I had to. I heard a voice in the back of my head telling me that if I stayed, maybe I could find where all those people went missing. They had to go somewhere, right? Maybe with the knowledge I had of the car, I could find them and get out, but I knew in my heart that wasn't true. I managed to get out of the car. When I got out, I ran as fast as I could, not looking back. As I ran with the keys in my pocket, I wasn't sure where I was running to. I thought I should maybe give them to Mrs. Patty, but I didn't feel like she should have that burden on her hands. After all, the keys could mean nothing. I decided just to keep them. I got home and went into my room. I looked for a good place to keep them, but ended up throwing them in my bedside drawer. The next day, I went to look at the old car to see if anything would change now that I had the key. The outside was normal. However, I was met with not only missing keys, but the interior of the car looked old. Not the typical brand new leather. I felt so relieved. The problem was fixed. I just needed to keep the keys in a safe spot or get rid of them altogether. I went back to my house with a plan to get rid of the keys. I opened up the drawer to find the keys missing. I panicked and dumped the whole drawer out onto the floor. No keys. I searched all around my room for hours. I tried to remember if maybe I never even put them in the drawer. If I misremembered, I gave up and went to sleep. After all, Maybe the keys just took care of themselves. Now I didn't have to worry about what to do with them. When the morning came, I had to drive out of town for some errands. I headed out to my car, but before I opened the door, my heart sank as I heard music playing on the radio. I slowly opened the door and peered over the steering wheel to see that rusty old key in the ignition. I felt the same strong urge to shut the door and let the car take me away to wherever the keys take people, but I was focused and got them out. Confusion filled my head. I had so many questions. How did the keys get into my car? How did they fit into both cars' ignitions perfectly? After testing if my normal keys still started my car, I jumped out and looked for a place to bury the old cured key. Before long, it was a foot underneath the earth. I checked my car a few hours later, and to my amazement, the old keys returned. I took them out again. My next attempt was putting them in a box and throwing it in a pond. They still came back. No matter what I did, they always came right back into my car. I even managed to split it in half with some heavy-duty tools, and boom, it came back a few hours later. Still to this day, I have those damn keys that just love my car. It seems they need a car as a host of some kind. I'm not a big fan of my car having the power to take me to the underworld at any minute, but if someone has to live with it, it should be someone who knows what they can do. That being said, I never let anyone borrow my car. And that is one of the many strange phenomena of my cozy little town. Seventh story. My sister is an urban legend. My sister is an urban legend. I never liked those growing up, probably because of her. You ever notice how when someone tells an urban legend, it always starts out something like, my brother's cousin had this girlfriend once who, yeah, sure he did. I think that's why people find urban legends fun, though. Nothing bad ever happens to someone you know personally, of course, but it's still someone connected to you, a friend of a friend of a friend. That makes it real enough to be fun, but not so real as to be horrifying or tragic. The thing is, though, urban legends have to start somewhere, and your dumb stories might not be so fun for the people who suffered the truth. Most people don't even remember that I had an older sister, much less who my sister was. Her name was Michelle, but everyone called her Missy. She liked baking a lot. We used to make cupcakes together. That's the strongest memory I have of her, and I hold on to it when times are tough. When people are talking, running their mouths without thinking twice. She always let me choose what color sprinkles to use. Isn't that nice? She was really kind to me for an older sister. Missy was a full 12 years older than me. I was only 6 when she died. Missy had this best friend, Ava. Ava was nice too, and when she came over, she and Missy would let me play with them, at least for a bit. They never treated me like a nuisance. My memories of Ava are scarce. In my mind, I see flashes of black hair, and I can hear her laugh. She had a very distinct laugh, the kind that makes you happy just to hear. Anyway, Ava got sick when she was in high school. Leukemia. She was sick for a while, and then she died. I saw her once or twice in the hospital when she was still feeling okay. I wasn't allowed to see her at the very end, though, but Missy went to see her every day. The day Ava died, Missy promised to keep seeing her every day, no matter what. And she kept her promise. After Ava's death, Missy used to drive to the cemetery every day after school. It was her senior year of high school, and she should have been out partying with friends, getting into all sorts of dumb trouble. But she wasn't. Instead, she spent every afternoon just sitting at Ava's grave. My parents encouraged it at first, but eventually they grew worried. This isn't healthy, my mother told my father one night. They were whispering, but not quietly enough. I suppose they hadn't realized that I was hiding at the top of the stairs, hanging on to every word. It's not good for her. She's torturing herself over this. I think we should talk to her. My father was a man of few words, so each word he used was important. I knew that there would be no more daily cemetery visits once they talked to Missy, and that made me relieved. I, too, was worried about my precious big sister. Unfortunately, they never had the chance. That night, Missy was late coming home from the cemetery. My parents were worried enough when the knock came at the door. Missy never knocked. When we saw the police officer standing there, asking for Michelle Turner's parents, we all knew what had happened. The details came later. It was dark and slippery out. I remember that it was winter then, and ice was beginning to form on the roads. That was probably why my parents were so worried. Anyway, they think a deer ran in front of our old Ford, and that's why Missy swerved. She lost control and rolled the car into a ditch just outside the cemetery. They assured us that it was instant and she didn't feel any pain. My parents buried Missy next to Ava. I begged them not to. At the time, I couldn't explain why exactly that felt wrong. Now I know. It's because she should be buried with us when the time comes. But my parents felt this was what Missy would want. Ava's family agreed, so that's where my sister is buried, next to her best friend in Sandwood Cemetery. Perhaps that's why the legend started. A few years after her death, long enough that the town wasn't in mourning anymore, my family and I started hearing the stories about the two dead girls in Sandwood, how their mysterious deaths could never be explained. People came up with all kinds of crazy ideas. In some versions of the story, Ava and Missy were lovers, torn apart by death only to be reunited in the afterlife. In others, Ava was jealous that Missy was still alive and ran her car off the road, so they would be even, which is both ridiculous and stupid. In all versions, though, Missy didn't roll her car by mere accident or coincidence. It was Ava's ghost or the face of death itself that did it. Or, and this one pains me the most, she rolled the car because she wanted to die, and that was the only way to make it look like an accident. I hate that version because out of all the stories, it's the only one that could be true. It was a full-blown urban legend by the time I hit high school. People were never careful around me because they didn't realize Missy and I were sisters. People had long forgotten to include Missy's last name in the stories. Besides, we were 12 years apart. Most people just assumed Missy was an only child. But she wasn't. She was my sister. That's my sister people are talking about. It's a fun urban legend for most people. It's a terribly painful, terribly real memory for me. I never talked about Missy. I didn't want people asking me about the legends or bothering me with them. I simply avoided them or expressed disinterest if they were brought up. It was working pretty well until one day near the beginning of my senior year. A couple of my friends, Sarah, Tom, and Gregory, wanted to go out to Sandwood one night and begged me to join. They say if you go out when the moon is full, you can hear the sound of the two girls laughing together, said Sarah in hushed tones. We were killing time in study hall, and I wanted nothing more to escape that stupid conversation. I remember rolling my eyes a little at her. Really? Why is it always a full moon? Honestly, some people are so unoriginal. But then I thought about Ava again, and her laugh. And I tried to think back to Missy's laugh. What it had sounded like. But the thing was I just couldn't remember. I was stuck on that sudden revelation when Greg and Tom jumped on board Sarah's proposal. Why not? It's a nice enough night for it. And it's not like we're going to get another chance, said Tom. Greg nodded and added, I'm blowing this shithole town as soon as I graduate. Might as well take on good story from it, right? Greg thought he was such a fucking badass. Real edgy. Sometimes it made me cringe, but I still liked him. I really should have said no. I should have told him I had homework or family night or something. There were a million excuses I could choose from. because I didn't want to make a mockery out of my sister's death, out of all the pain my family had been put through at her expense. But her laugh, I couldn't stop thinking about her laugh. And even though I knew I wouldn't hear it, knew the stories were bullshit. Yeah, I'm in. I had to take the chance. Greg drove. His parents were loaded and let him borrow any one of their numerous cars whenever he wanted. He picked me up last around 10 o'clock. I told my parents I was going to a study group and I'd be back late. They trusted me. They thought I'd moved on as much as I could from Missy's death. They really overestimated me. We drove out to the cemetery and parked on the side of the road, windows down so as to better hear the ghostly laughter. Everyone cracked open a beer, except for Greg, who actually didn't drink. I think about Greg a lot nowadays. He was always pretending to be someone else. Not that it really matters now, I guess. We sat there drinking for a while, laughing and chatting about school. Sarah was practically bouncing in her seat from nervous anticipation as the night wore on. It was all great fun to them, a game. I was nervous too, but not the good kind of nervous. Instead, I had a vaguely sick feeling in my stomach, like something bad was about to happen, but I wasn't sure what. The feeling intensified around midnight. That's when we would hear the laughter, Sarah told me, because that's when the veil separating life and death is lifted ever so slightly. That's when we can hear the dead. I didn't believe her. I'd waited for a sign from Missy since the day she died and never gotten one. I believe that dead is dead. No amount of wishing or hoping or sobbing in your bedroom while your parents drink themselves to sleep again will ever change that. I was musing on that when Sarah shushed us. Hey, listen, do you hear that? I thought she must be kidding. We all quieted down and listened. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves of the trees. For a moment, just one sliver of a moment, I thought I heard someone walking through the grass. And then it was gone. Tom snorted at us as he chugged the rest of his beer. I don't hear Sherdash. That's all he got out when the screaming started. It was all around us like we were caught in some kind of freak storm, shrieking and wailing, the likes of which I had never heard before in my life. It was like a portal to hell had been opened, and we were hearing the voices of the damned. It was the sound of pure agony, and it was so loud that it shook the car. No, wait, it wasn't shaking the car. Something else was. The car was rocking wildly back and forth, so hard that Sarah and I were bouncing on the seat. I hit my head against the top of the car and cringed, my vision blacking out for a second. I could hear the screams of my friends join the voices outside as the car rocked violently. I was terrified for a moment that whatever was outside would shake the car hard enough that it would roll over. I took a second to think about that, about the car rolling, about my death, about what my parents would think when I died, just like Missy had when Tom's voice tore through the night air. Roll the windows up. Jesus Christ, roll the windows up. My hand was on the window crank before I could even process what he'd said. I had the window up in seconds. Sarah, on the other hand, was curled up in a ball in the middle of the back seat, sobbing and rocking back and forth. I scrambled over her to close her window, trying to desperately hold my ground. The car was still rocking back and forth, back and forth. A few seconds later, the engine roared to life and the screams outside increased in volume. For a moment, the shaking got worse and I was thrown to the floor. Then Greg slammed on the gas and we shot out into the night like the proverbial bat out of hell. I know, cliché, but it's exactly how we felt. The shaking stopped. The screaming stopped. Everything stopped except for Tom and Greg's swearing and Sarah's sobs. I sat in the back seat, stunned and terrified, listening to the night wind as we left the cemetery in the dust. But just before we turned onto the main road, just before we left sight of the cemetery for good, I could have sworn I heard someone calling my name, in the voice of someone who had been dead for 12 years. That night ended our friendship. It seemed like a big deal at the time, but looking back, most high school friendships are doomed to fade into obscurity. We would have drifted apart sooner or later. Anyway, it was just the fact that it happened so suddenly that made it hard to swallow. But maybe it was for the best. Our experience became a part of the legends. We didn't hear stories about mysterious laughter anymore. Instead, we heard stories about screaming and shaking and hell. I chose not to listen to them. I didn't want it anymore. I just wanted it all to go away. But things like that don't ever really go away, do they? It's been many, many years since I graduated and left my hometown. Many years since I've been to Sandwood and put flowers on my sister's grave, praying and hoping that I would wake up and everything would have been one big nightmare. I don't have nightmares anymore. Nothing in my dreams can be worse than what I've seen awake. It's the 30th anniversary of my sister's death this year. My parents want me to come home for her death date. They want me to visit the cemetery with them. And I know I should. I know it's important to them, and it's my duty to them as their daughter. And yet I find myself hesitating as the season draws to a close, as the snow begins to fall and ice begins to cover the roads. Because I'm terrified of the day when I return. I'm terrified of hearing my name whispered once again in the cold stillness of the cemetery, beckoning me to glance at what's on the other side. 8th story. I think I just met the creature from a creepy Finnish urban legend, Niitymies. The original story from the internet goes like this. The Opie is hiking and fishing somewhere in the eastern Lapland, Finland. Opie has been lucky with fishing, and just for the fun of it, he wraps them in a cloth and makes a bundle to carry over his shoulder. He gets a little bit lost on his way back, but finds a small road. He can't find the road on his map, but he figures that the road will eventually get him somewhere where he can ask for help. After a while, he sees an older man walking on the road. The man has a gun in his hand and points it at Opie as soon as he sees him and demands Opie to stop. What do you have in your bundle? Man with the gun asks, and Opie answers truthfully. It's just some fish. The man then wants to see the fish before he finally puts his gun down. Opie describes that the man looks somehow relieved after checking the bundle, and recalls being very confused about the situation. He thinks that the man is probably someone raising reindeer, so just walking out there in the middle of the nowhere is not really that strange. But usually these people are very friendly and chatty. The man then asks Opie whether he has a gun with him or not. Opie doesn't have one. He is there just for fishing. It's not normal to carry a gun around in Finland. People do that usually only when hunting, and you need to have a permit. When the man hears this, he tells Opie that he will walk Opie to a larger road that will take Opie to the closest village. He seems very rushed and tells Opie that he needs to get out of the woods as soon as possible. Opie is very confused and is starting to get very scared. When Opie asks why they are in such a rush, the man tells him that he is not the only soul coming from the direction where the Opie is coming from. They arrive to the bigger road. Before departing, the old man grabs his hand. If you see someone in the road with a bundle similar to yours, you best pray that the bundle is full. You don't want to know what's in there, but as long as it is full, you should be all right. If it asks you something, don't answer, and under no circumstances do not ask about the bundle. If it comes closer, you need pray like crazy and close your eyes. That will be at least a little better. At this point, Opie is terrified, but still skeptic of the tales that the old man is telling him. At first, he is making his way towards the village by walking, but after a little while, he suddenly gets very anxious and starts running. Opie keeps looking back to make sure that the road is and stays empty. He can't run for long with everything he is carrying with him, but even when walking, he tries to keep his pace as fast as possible. The forest seems to be completely quiet all of a sudden. This time, when Opie looks back, he sees it, tall, slender figure that seems to be carrying bundle in his shoulder. It is still quite far away, but Opie doesn't want to wait for it to get closer. He drops everything and starts running. Opie writes that he doesn't recall anything from that point to finally arriving the village. He doesn't look back even once. Opie runs to the first house and knocks the door. Luckily, some woman opens the door immediately, as if she had been waiting behind the door for him to knock, and lets him in. Opie tries to explain what happened, but woman doesn't seem to be too surprised. She is looking out from a window, and when Opie takes a look, he sees it. It is standing still on the road, looking straight at the house. "I am so glad that I got away," Opie says. "You didn't get away. It just had its bundle full, but it didn't get to me. I was way ahead. I was watching you from the window. It was right behind you the whole time." This is quite closely a direct translation of the most popular Neotomies story circulating on the internet. By the way it is told, it seems to be just another internet copypasta. There are of course others as well, and even my grandpa seems to know the story. My grandparents have a summer cottage in Lapland. When we were little, my grandparents would take us kids there, me and my older brother, sometimes our cousin, every summer. When we were a little bit older, my grandpa told us scary horror stories that mostly took place in Lapland. My grandma had to stop him sometimes when we were too scared to even go to sleep after hearing these stories. Many of them involve something called nighted. As I have explained before, nighty can be translated to a bundle, but the word is rare enough that on its own, without a context, I didn't even make the connection to bundles. I just thought it was the name of those beings. In these stories, nighty wasn't completely coherent concept, but rather just this evil spirit kind of thing that wandered in the forests. One particular story about it eating the souls of those lost in the wilderness has stayed with me. Back to the present. Me and a few of my friends decided to visit to my grandparents' cottage last weekend just to have a little nice vacation on our own. One of my friends, Laura, wanted to bring her BF Topi with us as well, so in total there were 3 girls and 1 guy. The first day was just ordinary, chill day. The second evening we warmed up the sauna and decided to go ice swimming on the lake. After we girls got back from the sauna, Topi asked us if we had seen anything out of normal when we were walking back from the sauna. The sauna is on its separate building near the water, about 100 m from the main building where we were sleeping. He told us that he had seen someone or something standing on the road, watching us making our way back to the cottage. He told us that it looked like it had had something hanging from its shoulder, but it was far enough to not see it clearly. I remember the story of Neotomies, and I was sure that he knew it as well and was just trying to scare us. The girls all laughed, but he wouldn't admit to it. On contrary, he seemed to be adamant about seeing something in there. We forgot the whole thing as the night went on. The cottage is quite small. There was a sofa bed in the main room and some mattresses on a loft above it. Laura and Topi took the sofa, and me and the other friend slept on the loft. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, I was woken up by the crying Laura. She was shushing me to be quiet. It's not nice to be woken up in the middle of the night, so I might have sworn or something, and to come look out from the window with her. Topi was already awake and looked just as scared as Laura. Apparently, Laura had woken up to go to the toilet and seen something on the road on her way back. Lots of these older cottages still have the outhouse toilet without a running water. It had looked just like Topi had described it, although it was dark outside, so she didn't get a good look. Suddenly, the thing had started to run, maybe fly would be a better word, towards Laura. Laura said that it was unnaturally fast. Laura ran back to the cottage and locked the door behind her. She then woke up first Topi, and then us. Sure enough, when we peeked from the window outside, I was almost shitting myself. I was so scared we saw it. It just stand there a few meters from the cottage and was looking straight at us. It had the bundle over its shoulder, just like it had been described. I am pretty sure the bundle had something in it. I had to look because I remember the stories about the Neotomies. After some time, it just turned and went away, straight to the forest. We didn't sleep at all that night. In the morning, I called my grandpa and told him what had happened. He told us to immediately pack our bags and drive away without looking back, so that's what we did. It could have been just some random creepy dude, but why? But I have never been as scared as I was then. It's been almost a week, but it still scares me shitless. I am certain of what I saw, and the others are as well. I know I sound paranoid and insane, but for real, a lot of people get lost in the wilderness. I think I might have really seen the Neotomies last weekend. I'm going to visit my grandparents next weekend. I want to ask Grandpa what he knows about the Neotomies. TLDR, there is a story about a man with a bundle wandering around in Lapland, Finland. If you meet this man, you better pray his bundle is full. Last weekend, a man with a bundle chased after my friend, and we saw it from a window in my grandparents' cottage in Lapland. Ninth story. I saw an urban legend. This story goes back a while. A few months ago, my two best friends, who happen to be sisters, and I were out on their roof stargazing. We chatted a while and tried to find constellations. Eventually, we sat up and shivered under the thin blanket we had brought out with us. Our conversation came to a lull, and in the silence, I looked out across the street. I saw the lower half of a woman's body for no more than a few seconds. Shocked, I looked at my best friend, Jane. I quietly said to both girls, "I think I just saw a ghost." Immediately, the other girl, Ella, is terrified and begs to go inside. Meanwhile, Jane looks at me with wide eyes and says, "Across the street? Translucent legs?" We scampered inside and began to discuss what just happened. Ella saw nothing, but Jane saw the same thing I did. Fast forward to a few days ago. I went to the theater with a close friend, Maya. While we waited for the movie to start, we whispered to each other, and the topic of ghosts came up. I recounted my experience, and she practically froze. Apparently, there's an urban legend that 100 years ago or so, a woman named Betty was buried. Half of her was buried in Maryland and the other half in my town. According to her, people in Maryland see the upper body, and people in my town see the lower body. I haven't had any particularly interesting paranormal experience since my original encounter, but I can't stop thinking about this. At first, the thought terrified me, but now it's just exciting, and I feel lucky to have had such a paranormal encounter. 10th story. There's this urban legend about the dragonfly. I remember when I was a child, my dad would tell me and my brother of the urban legend surrounding dragonflies. For those of you unaware of the strange nature of the dragonfly, allow me to fill you in. Apparently, if you're a child out too late, dragonflies can sense it and will attempt to punish you by sewing your mouth, eyes, nose, and ears shut with their tails. Imagine that for a moment. A bug that might fly directly into your face and quickly sew your head orifices shut with little provocation. Walking through the woods or some overgrown field, you happen to disturb a dragonfly perched atop a blade of long grass and have it attack you, leaving you blind, deaf, unable to scream, unable to breathe. Horrific. It gives me chills just mulling the possibility. My big brother and I would always turn our noses up at this and frown, sure that our dad was telling us tall tales to make sure we would come home when the sun went down. That was it. Nothing more, nothing less. But our dad persisted and would go into graphic detail about some kid he'd gone to school with. My dad, when he was a child, would go down to an empty lot often with a group of neighboring kids. They would dig in the dirt with sticks to imitate pirates sketching out crude maps to a treasure. They would pitch rocks at one another and whack them away with sticks, they would take up in all manner of play. However, there was this one kid that no one ever invited to their deserted lot. This boy's name was Tanner, and no one liked Tanner. He would always insert himself into their playtime and almost always ruin the fun for everyone. He wasn't exactly a bully from what I've gathered in my father's description, but he often whined and was a right party pooper. Whenever Tanner would be excluded from their activities, he would run home and tell his parents all about the miscreant children's endeavors. Then so it would be that their setting fire to an ant hill would be put to a stop, and the tomboy who'd brought her dad's matches to play with would be grounded. In particular, my dad hated Tanner, but whenever he would tell stories about that time in his life, he always seemed to look back on Tanner as a sort of tragic figure. As an adult, my father could see the cruelty in himself and his peers whenever they excluded the boy. Kids can be cruel, my dad would say, but I reckon that's just the way things go. He would revel in telling me and my brother the sorts of misadventures that him and the other children would get into, and we would always listen with great attention as we'd grown up in the age of the internet. And it was helpful in some nebulous way to hear about a time gone by when kids would play with dirt and marbles, and that was enough somehow. It was simply neat. The aforementioned tomboy, named Rachel, was the girl who'd given my father his first ever kiss at the age of 8 behind an old honeysuckle bush. The other children found out and endlessly teased both into never speaking to one another ever again. I remember when our dad told us that bit, I stuck my tongue out and gagged, but my brother, who was a few years older than me, elbowed me and listened intently to our old man. That was also the day we learned of the dragonflies. We were riding in the car to visit the oncologist. Our mother sat in the driver's seat, maintaining eye contact with the road. Our dad twisted in his seat to face me and my brother in the back, his bony frame and bald head and tired eyes moving, motioning as the story unfolded. He and a few of the other kids in his neighborhood had just bought a new explicit music CD from a teenager and were returning to their lot, to their makeshift tin shack they constructed with old sheet metal and branches to listen to the thing on a collective battery-powered stereo. They were all overly excited to learn a few new curse words. As the group walked along the sidewalk, Tanner fell into step with them, pestering my father with question after question. "Where'd you get that? Why's that lady on the cover wearing no clothes? Where you guys going? And finally, I'm going to tell my parents if you don't, let me listen to it too." They had no choice but to let Tanner into their shack if he promised to shut his yap and not touch their stereo. Tanner protested, but ultimately agreed to this arrangement. Quickly, they settled onto the furniture they'd scavenged from the nearby woods. An old stool, a moldy recliner, and a particle board table. They inserted the CD and powered it on, head banging and dancing like little idiots. My father told this bit with his trademark smile, and even my mother in the driver's seat was cornered and had no other option but to grin solemnly gray. A fucking dash started my dad, but upon feeling my mother tense her shoulder, he rephrased. Of course, that rotten Tanner started skipping songs on the CD. My dad threw his hands up. Even after all these years, he was vividly upset with the child. That's when my dad started slapping Tanner's hand whenever it reached out for the silver button on the old stereo. The feeling in the shack was palpable and visceral. A fist fight was brewing, and every one of the children knew it. Finally, Tanner reached out again to skip another song. My father slapped his hand, and Tanner, red in the face and teary-eyed, grabbed the square black box with speakers and held it over his head. "Fine," screamed Tanner before slamming the thing against the dirt floor. It shattered, and the song died into a creaking sputter. The group had had enough and shoved Tanner from their clubhouse so that the little boy went head under feet and straight into the ground. Tanner began crying and slinging dirt into a frenzy, tossing it into their faces. You guys are nothing but a lot of bullies, you know that? All you ever do is pick on me. Bunch of jerks. He spat out a mouthful of dirt, wiping his dusty cheeks. My dad, not too proud of this recollection, jumped onto Tanner's back and sat on him. The other children followed suit and began sitting on the screaming boy. I can't breathe, he would shout. No one cared. They'd had enough of the brat. He began hyperventilating and kicking and punching. It was funny at first, but knowing they couldn't keep him down forever, they got off the boy and let him scramble away. You're crazy, he screamed at them. You could have killed me. He spit and wiped at his face again. That's when they began throwing rocks at the boy. Most of them were light tosses, to be sure, but one of them connected with the side of Tanner's face, sending out a rush of hot red blood. Tanner looked at his hands, now covered in the stuff, and cried even harder. Then he ran from the group across the empty lot and disappeared through a hole in the fence where beyond only the forest was. That was the last we saw of him, said my dad. None of us ever said anything about it, but I know we all felt bad about it. The police asked us lots of questions the following day. Turns out he died in those woods. Our parents stopped letting us go out to that lot after that. My dad sighed, and this was followed with a wet cough, quickly transforming into a gasp for air until his eyes were full of water and his hands were shaking. After regaining control of himself, he continued, rumors spread that the dragonflies got him because he got lost and couldn't get out of the woods before dark. My brother, wide-eyed, asked, why did they say that? Our father shrugged. They said he was found with everything sewed up. He motioned with his bony index finger to emulate the motions of a dragonfly, sewing his face shut. Noticing our small, horrified expressions, he put both hands over his chest, all crisscross, and closed his eyes with his tongue stuck out. It did extraordinarily little to lighten the mood. When our father died, my brother grew distant, stopped playing with me, and started hanging out with other teenagers while I still colored in my SpongeBob crayon book. I was left alone, confused by the whole world, and always waiting for my dad to come home. I would tug on my brother's shirt, pleading to do things like we used to, perhaps hoping to create adventures like the ones our dad told us of. I would be met with a swift knuckle to the forearm, and my arm would hang limp by my side for a few brief seconds with tears pooling in my eyes. Mom, always the resilient type, withdrew emotionally, and it is only in retrospect that I am aware that she was trying to hold herself together. I honestly believe that she thought she was doing the right thing, not wanting to destroy us all in her own grief. She worked, cleaned, absently lived her life. That always makes me sad. This is what I remember. I hate you, screamed my brother, as my mom held up the small bag of marijuana she'd found stowed in between his mattress and box springs. It was all so vivid. She confronted him and his troublemaking ways. I hid in the corner of the doorway to his bedroom. Fuck this, he said, shoving past her. He nearly stumbled over me in the hall, but upon seeing me there, he stopped and put his hand on my shoulder. I'm leaving and I'm not coming back. He started to move away, but it seemed that something occurred to him, and he turned to look at me full-on crouching to meet my eyes. I love you. I was stunned. He pulled me into a brisk hug and left out the front door. I could hear my mother crying through the wall that night. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to go to her and tell her it was all right. I wanted to let her know that he was just lashing out. I was 10. That night, I crawled out of bed long after I was sure that Mom had gone to sleep. I crept through the house and into the living room, withdrawing an old photo album from the cabinet near the fireplace. It was covered in dust, and I laid it out over my lap as I sat in the armchair with my father's outline infinitely pressed into it. On the first page, there was a happy family of 3, and the mother had a swollen belly beneath her sundress. She was giving the grinning man in the photo a smirk and eye roll as he snapped the photo. This was in a park. The little boy there was forever posed in a laugh with squinted eyes, his head lolled back. I flipped through the photo album and watched the grinning man grow thinner and thinner, but that smile stayed the same. His smile was always there. It seemed that everything else around the mouth changed, including the people. The boy developed pimples and an icy, angsty stare. The mother's expression hardened into a stony resolve that broke my heart. The younger boy, no longer in his mother's womb, grew from a chubby baby into a round-faced boy with a confused look on his face. The man still smiled. As the pictures came to an end, the pimply boy, now a teen, wore all black and painted his fingernails. The mother stopped letting her hair fall into a frizzy, wavy mess and instead opted to wrangle it into a tight ponytail to expose the deepening creases across her forehead. The round-faced boy looked at his father with admiration. The man smiled still. The last picture was of a water-eyed family crowded around a slim man in a hospital bed. The man's skin clung to his skull like the thin paper they wrap gourmet sandwiches in. The mother was pole-stiff next to the bed, looking directly into the camera and holding the man's finger with a limp grasp. The teen's cheeks were stained with mascara. The round-faced boy stood next to his brother, looking at the tiles of the hospital floor. The man in the hospital bed pointed at his chest with one hand and held the other in a thumbs-up fashion. His bruised eyes expressed that he was not worried about the surgery. It was everything else around the mouth that changed. I shuffled the last photo out of its page and held it up to the first. In between, there was a story here that only we could know. All of a sudden, everything made sense to that confused-looking round-faced boy as he sat in his father's armchair. A sound clattered from the kitchen, and I jumped, dropping the book onto the floor and pulling my scared feet underneath my bottom. After a moment of complete silence, I shifted from the chair and scampered across the living room to peek into the kitchen. The room was pitch black, save the moonlight splashing in from the sliding glass door that led onto the back patio. I could feel the blackness all around me like little bugs, hissing in through my teeth. I smacked the light switch near the threshold and kept my eyes fixed to the glass door as the overhead bulb spit light onto the patio. I could see something moving out there, something humanoid and shifting and black against the kitchen light. I held my breath and slowly, deftly moved across the tiles. As I reached the glass door, I put my face against it, cupping my hands. Nothing. Then the dark figure sprang to life, smacking against the door and rattling it in its frame. I tumbled backwards, falling over one of the wooden kitchen chairs, scrambling to flee the monster. I trod across the room, hiding at the edge of the threshold, and turning to look back. I saw a hand grasp for the handle, and the light shone it was pale, and it had painted fingernails. I gasped and rushed back to the glass door, unlocking it and sliding it open. My brother fell into the kitchen, face down, hands scrambling all around, feeling. His body contorted and he clawed at his downturned face. I reached out to touch his shoulder, and he recoiled, turning to expose his face to me. I let out a shrill, stiff cry. His mouth, eyes, nostrils, and ears had been sewn shut in a tangle of thick black thread. He reached out for me, and I could see his cheeks turn purple and swell. He grabbed at my legs, and I backed away in terror, still screaming. Then he fell limp. I could hear my mother moving through the house. She stomped into the kitchen, obviously prepared to hand out disciplinary action. When she saw my brother lying lifeless on the kitchen tiles, She stopped dead in her tracks before springing to action, trying to shake him back into existence. We buried my brother and lived on, putting it away so that it's one of those things that we rarely withdraw and discuss. My mother softened after his death, and we keep in touch. Whenever I visit, we talk about everything besides my dad and brother. As time goes on and her mind has started to slip away into oblivion, she opens more. The most recent time I joined her for dinner, she told me to be careful of the dragonflies. For a long time, I thought that maybe I was the only one that had recalled the story from my father's childhood, but it seems she does too. I miss them every day, and still time's arrow marches forward. Now that I have children of my own, I tell them the story of Tanner and the dragonflies. I'm not quite the storyteller my dad once was, but I give it my best, and it scares them well. I hope it does. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.